Okay, so what I had for the prepared section is a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about how I got into the specialty area and also give you guys some pointers and how I work with my clients when people are trying to figure out the right type of job or career. And then we're going to have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. And I like to mention to people that before I got into coaching, I had a corporate career. So I used to run departments. I would interview people for job openings, make hiring decisions, right, and manage staff. So, and I think that really has helped me in my coaching work to see the two sides, right? We know that employers need a business result, having a sense of what's going to be realistic in the workplace. And then, of course, creating opportunities for people on the.
Sorry about that.
No worries. But anyway, so after I had been in the business arena for a couple of decades, I felt ready for a career change and really wanted to find something where I could give back my business experience to people who really could benefit from it. So I found out about the coaching profession. I did a couple of certification programs, and the second of which at William James College actually focused on executive coaching. All right, and I left that certification thinking, you know what, I think my goal is I really want to help entrepreneurs to grow their companies, right, and really be successful. But then, as sometimes happens in life, things took a little detour when I received the continuing education catalog from William James. And one of the offerings was a workshop about individuals with Asperger's syndrome. Now, this was back in the spring of 2006. And as I'm reading this, I remember hearing a little bit about Asperger's, and I said, you know, I always kind of interested me. So I signed up for this workshop really just for my own information. All right, and when I attended, it was either 3 or 4 hours long, and I realized at the end that I had literally been sitting on the edge of my chair. And it was just so fascinating. And I said, you know, looking at my previous corporate experience, I felt pretty positive. I said, I think I've actually worked with a couple of people who sound like they had Asperger's syndrome. All right. So I actually, one of the speakers at the workshop was the executive director of the Asperger Autism Network, which is a large group here in the greater Boston area. And I got in touch with her to let her know how much I enjoyed it. I said, gee, I think the business community really needs to know about this. We have, you know, so many people with all kinds of talents and abilities, right, that really could be put to good use. And she was the person who kind of planted that seed with me. And when I needed, she suggested, Barbara, well, given your background, have you thought of coaching people with Asperger's? Because no one's really talking about employment. And I was really intrigued by the idea, so I started reading anything I could get my hands on, any kind of training. And again, at that time, a lot of it was really focused on children. So I'd be thinking, well, how could I kind of extrapolate some of what I'm learning, and how would that apply to be helping people who are adults and you know, ready to enter the workforce or already there. All right. And I also started talking with various professionals and kept getting the same kind of encouragement. People said, no one's really talking about employment. So that's how things kind of took off from there. And it was in the fall of 2006 that I decided to specialize my practice, right, and really focusing on people with Asperger's, similar autism spectrum profiles, as well as individuals with nonverbal learning disorder. All right, and right now there are really, I would say, 3 primary reasons that someone would work with me. I have one group of clients who are trying to figure out what is going to be a manageable type of job or career. I have a second group of active job seekers. All right, so they're saying, I need help with a realistic search plan, make sure my resume is really clearly communicating my abilities, and oftentimes wanting help with interviewing skills. And then there's a third group of people who are employed and facing some challenges in the workplace and really needing some strategies on how to overcome whatever might be getting in the way. But since I started working with individuals, I've expanded as well to other services. I provide consultation and coaching to parents who may want some ideas about how to help their son or daughter. I also do professional training. I developed an Asperger Autism Employment Coach certification, right, for coaches who want to expand their practice. I get a lot of career counselors, disability service providers at universities, as well as people at nonprofits. And then I have a variation of that specifically for vocational rehabilitation specialists. And then I also work with employers, maybe saying we want some ideas about how to help employees be more successful, or maybe change the way we are evaluating candidates, right, who are applying for jobs at our company. And I actually have written 3 books on the topic of Asperger's and employment. And as Judy mentioned, the first one was really focused on getting a job. And then the second is for people who are employed. And I kind of go through some of the common kinds of challenges that come up and offering some strategies. And then the third one is really geared toward professionals as well as parents of adults who are on the spectrum. My client base is actually pretty diverse. I work with people in their later teens. I've had a few clients even in their 70s. And even prior to COVID, I did a lot of coaching work over the telephone, Skype, and the Zoom platform, as well as in person for people who are local in Massachusetts. But it really gave me the opportunity for quite a while now to be working with people all around the United States, individuals outside of this country, and even the types of jobs that people are seeking or have, or their experience level really runs the gamut from those who are entry level, just starting their working life, to people who are in manager, corporate positions. I have people at a vice president level, all right, and anything from creative fields to, yes, the high tech. I have lawyers and attorney or doctors, just really all kinds of different jobs and careers. But I do like to mention that the majority of my clients are in a competitive employment situation. And by that, I mean, it would be a person who says, I'm going on the job boards, I'm applying for a market wage, right, kind of position, not a sheltered employment situation. All right, but now I want to share some thoughts about finding a job or career that is manageable, and the way that I work with my clients who are wanting to answer this question. And really could all of this would apply to someone maybe who is just starting to thinking about work, right? Or maybe just entering and trying to make some good decisions, to people who maybe have tried 1 or 2 different job or career areas that didn't work out. And maybe they're saying, now I want to think about some other options that I have. All right, so what I'm going to do is walk you through the 4 areas, which would be some thoughts about interests and how that can inform job choice. Also abilities, and then the work environment, which I find to be really important for most of my clients. And then looking at how does Asperger's autism impact a particular individual. All right, so I want to start with interests, which certainly are important. I think most people want a job they're at least somewhat interested in. But one mistake that I see people make is placing pretty much all of their emphasis on interest when it comes to choosing a job or career area. All right, and I want to give you an example about what I mean. And I'm going to go back probably over a decade now when I was participating in some training for the Massachusetts Vocational Rehabilitation Commission. And one of the vocational counselors shared a story of a man he was working with who wanted to become an airline pilot. All right, and it was the only occupation this man would consider, but yet he didn't really seem to have a background that would indicate, any kind of, real experience in this area. So the counselor, asked him more about his interest and discovered that this man wanted to be a pilot so that he could wear a uniform. All right, so that was an interest that happened to be a really, really small part, right, of what it means to actually fly an aircraft, right? And the counselor said he, was finally able to find this man a job at one of the upscale Boston hotels as a doorman, because the doorman there had to wear uniforms. And he said this man was completely happy with that job, right? And when he looked into aviation, right, realized he really didn't have an interest. So I think that just, kind of shows us that, you have to be very cautious that you're not looking at, too limited an area, right? And not saying, boy, just because I'm interested in a topic, it must mean that I could be successful working in that field. All right, and I think a great question to ask yourself is to say, okay, I have an interest in this area. If I'm actually working as a pilot or whatever it is you're interested in, what do I see myself doing if I'm actually employed in that field? All right, and if it's not clear, I really encourage my clients to do some preliminary research and really focus on what are the jobs that are available, what are the tasks that someone would be doing throughout their workday, right, if they were employed in this area. What kind of skills does a person need, right, to do that work, right? And then be thinking, what would be required to actually acquire the skills that would make me marketable. Right, so I think that's really important to, just not put the major emphasis. Interest is one piece of the equation in figuring out a good job or career. All right, then a second area I want to look at with my clients concerns abilities, right, and looking at a person's talents. And by this, I mean the things that we're kind of born with, that we naturally do well. And usually people can go back even to, their childhood and say, yeah, I always had, an ability to write well, or I really was drawn to art, right, and had a real talent for drawing or sculpting or acting, all right, etc. All right, so that would be one area, the natural talents. Then also looking at a person's skills, all right, and these fall into two categories. We have what are known as the hard skills, which are things that we learn how to do, such as, if I want to be a programmer, well, I have to learn some of the coding languages, right? Those are hard skills in order to be able to do that work. Someone who has a proficiency with the Microsoft Office suite, the PowerPoint, Excel, Word documents, right? That's another example of a hard skill area. All right, and then we look at the soft skills, and that's where we're really talking about interpersonal communication, right? For all of us trying to get an idea, what would be the amount and type of communication, right, for a particular person that they would be able to feel comfortable with, right, and manage in the workplace. All right, and then certainly when we're looking at abilities, another piece of that is education. And here again, there are lots of ways that people can become qualified, right, for particular types of jobs. Yes, some do require a bachelor's degree or beyond, right? But then there are other options that may require a certificate or certification program, which those might run anywhere from 3 to 6 months to a year or two. I have a lot of people doing boot camps, where again, they're really zeroing in on very specific skills for a certain area. And most of my clients who are doing the boot camps are in the various technology sectors. And then for other people, it may be vocational training or an associate's degree, right? So maybe I want to be in the skilled trades like plumbing or carpentry, right? Or something like graphic design. Again, we're really zeroing in on preparing for a specific type of work. Now, the third area that I think, or I work with in my clients, and I think really is critical, is kind of thinking about the right type of work environment. All right, when I'm looking at jobs and saying, all right, what are some aspects here of actually performing the tasks that I want to be aware of and make sure they're a good match for me? So, for example, we can think about physical aspects. Where am I going to be doing this job? All right, is it going to be work that's happening indoors? Or am I going to be outside, maybe in the elements and have to be out on days where maybe it's not so comfortable, right, to be outdoors? Is it going to happen in an office setting in a cubicle? Or does it mean I'm going to be in a factory or warehouse setting, right? And maybe there's, you know, kind of a noisy environment. Would that be something that I could manage? And even thinking just of our own physical body, do I need to have very strong coordination, right, to do this particular job, or maybe visual spatial ability, etc. All right, so really looking at the physical aspects. Then we want to think about performance requirements. What's the pace of this work? All right, because there are some jobs that really require an employee to turn out a lot of product or output in a pretty short amount of time. And some people thrive in those kind of environments. Other people may say, you know, I need something where I can really concentrate on one thing, go at a slower pace. All right, so understanding that aspect. Also an important question to ask yourself is, how much structure do I need in a job? Am I the type of person who needs to come in and say, all right, I know exactly what I need to do and how I need to do it, which would indicate a high amount of structure? Or am I someone who says, you know what, I kind of like coming in and not knowing what I might encounter that day when I'm at my job? All right, or maybe I'm somewhere in between. And then certainly things like multitasking, which really, you know, it's attention shifting. Right, and is that pretty easy for me to do as I go through the day, right? Shift my focus, or do I really need one thing at a time and then move on to something else? Right, so these are all aspects of being able to successfully perform various types of jobs. And then even the interpersonal communication piece, right? And thinking about, you know, how much interaction do I want to have with other people? Am I comfortable when I'm interacting with my supervisor and a few people on my work team? Or would it be that I'm comfortable interacting with customers, right? Or maybe with people in different parts of the company? All right. Do I like interacting with people where I'm answering a question or providing information? Or is it more problem solving, right? Or maybe people now, maybe they're kind of upset, or, you know, something happened that shouldn't happen. I'm going to be the person who's going to figure out a solution. All right, so all these various, and I find sometimes that work environment can be just as important as job tasks, right? When we're talking about success in the workplace. All right, and then the fourth area that I work with my clients on is really understanding how does Asperger's autism impact that particular individual. All right, and all of us, every human being on the planet, we all have our areas of strength and then things that are challenging in some way. All right, and when I'm working with my clients, what we want to look at is kind of that profile. So a person can be choosing jobs that are maximizing the things they do well, right, and kind of minimize the things that might be so stressful, right, that would just make it, really, really hard, right, to manage a particular job. All right, and then sometimes in thinking about impact, we can also look at maybe ways to mitigate challenges. So maybe a person would have to learn or improve certain types of skills. Maybe there's an assistive technology, right, that would enable them to work around a challenge, or maybe an accommodation within the workplace under the Americans with Disabilities Act. All right, and I just want to give you an example of kind of putting this all together. One of my clients, Brandon, who had a degree in transportation planning. And by the time we were working together, he had a couple of internships when he was in school. And he also had a job that he was laid off from. And he had been looking now for a new job for somewhere in the 6+ month category. And he wasn't having a lot of success. And he was also concerned about some of the descriptions, what he was seeing in a lot of the job descriptions. And what we realized was previously his experience had been with pretty small government agencies, right? So it's really kind of a laid back environment. And now these other jobs, right, just seemed like they had a much more challenging aspect to them. All right, so the first thing that we did is we went through various assessments, background of his experience, right? We kind of came up with a little bit of a profile, right? And realizing that he did well with working with data, right? Collecting it, analyzing, right? Maybe being able to make sure that we are putting it into a format that people can easily access it when they need it, right? Doing research on topics and writing reports and responding to information requests, right, from some of his colleagues. But then the things that were challenging for him, he saw a lot of jobs that said self-starter, right, meaning that the employee would be expected to come in and manage their workday and all of their projects independently. And Brandon said, that's not me. I really need someone to direct me. It's right. Here are the 3 things you need to do. Right. He was noticing a lot of multitasking, fast pace, right? Interacting with people inside and outside the organizations who had very different information needs and motivations. And he said, I think that would be hard for me to see all these different perspectives. All right, and then they wanted strong presentation skills. All right, so in putting all of this together, right, what we realized was that probably transportation planning wasn't really a great area. However, there were related jobs, logistics, compliance, cost estimating within that transportation industry that he really had a big interest in. All right, so we started looking at those jobs, right, which were more structured, right, more of a process and procedure. And sure enough, within 3 or 4 months, all right, I believe it was in a logistics area. All right, so sometimes that's what happens as well. Maybe you get a little experience or you're doing some research and a person kind of shifts, right? So maybe the original thing I was looking at or I've tried isn't really a great fit. But there can be other related things that will be. All right, so I just want to share with you a few resources that might be helpful. If you are wanting to get an idea of what some certain jobs are like, I really recommend the Occupational Outlook Handbook. which is available free of charge on the internet. And it's a large database that describes all kinds of different jobs and careers, right? Tasks, how do I qualify, give you an idea of whether it's a competitive market or whether there's a lot of demand, a lot of really good preliminary information. If you are wanting to learn more about disclosing to an employer, requesting accommodations, the Job Accommodation Network has a lot of information for employers and employees, including an area where you can look at possible accommodations by disability type. And sometimes I work with people who say, I'm not even sure what I might be able to ask for. What might help me, right, to be successful in my job? And just to look at some of the examples, they say, oh, I never thought about that, but I think this would really help me. All right, so now I have an accommodation that I want to ask for. And then I publish a monthly newsletter. Each one focuses on a different aspect of employment. So if you would like to be added to the distribution list, you can send me an email, all right, and I will do that for you. All right, and then I also have 3 guides that you can download, again, at no charge. You can do these automatically through my website. All right. And then finally, I'll mention that I do offer a free 30-minute information session for prospective new coaching clients. All right, so if you think you might be interested in coaching, I've used that time to find out a little bit more about your situation, explain how the process works, and answer any questions. And there is certainly no obligation to proceed with services. All right, so this is the conclusion of the prepared material, right? And here's my contact information. And now I believe we'll be moving on to Q&A.
Barbara, thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear that how you got into this. Most of us get into this because we're parents. So it's interesting that you got into this because of inspiration. So that's really amazing. So this is your time where you can ask Barbara questions. I'm really excited. I got a couple Career Club folks here who I know have read your book. Is it okay if I stop sharing? If you want to stop sharing and you can.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. So if you have a question, you can either raise your hand or raise your virtual hand, and we will call on you. And I'm going to check the chat quickly to see if there's anything in the chat. I saw that there might have been one in the chat here. Oh, Deborah complimented you. She said, this is one of the most helpful and informative presentations I've heard on this road. Thank you so much. No questions.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let's see. Why don't we do this? If no one has any questions, I'm going to ask. Savag, I knew you would. Okay, Savag, you want to ask your question, please?
I heard that a lot of people were not just a matter of unemployed, but also underemployed. Do you think people look at people with Asperger's and assume they came to get an actual job that pays them actually pays the full-time salary and stuff?
I mean, I just think, so first of all, people really can be impacted in a lot of different ways, right? And so, I work with some people who, have corporate jobs, right? And they have not disclosed, they have no accommodation, and sometimes have a few challenges, things they want to work on. But basically, they're doing fine getting promotions. I think for other people, it may be a little bit more difficult, for example, communication, right? Because in the workplace, there are just so many jobs where there is a big emphasis on pretty strong communication skills, right? So then it may be a matter of, again, maybe requesting accommodations, or maybe matching up. If someone says, you know, I have people who sometimes tell me I've had 3 or 4 jobs, right, in the same field, and I start to realize that, you know, they all maybe are requiring a lot of communication with other stakeholders, and that's something that's really difficult for me. So then it may be a matter of saying, what would be some other jobs, right, where I'm not going to have that kind of requirement that will play more to my strengths, which maybe are more working with data, right, or in a structured job. So I think that's, you know, it's you really have to look at a particular person, right, and kind of that profile of ability and challenges and interests, and then kind of matching up, right, and maybe being willing to say, you know, I've tried one area, maybe I have a degree area. That's another scenario sometimes in my clients. And they say, you know what, now I'm realizing, unfortunately, for the jobs that are available in that area, that they're just like kind of the opposite sometimes, right, of what I can manage, right, and really what I want to be doing. And that's why I do think the research is so important, right, before making big decisions about education. And
Thanks, Barbara. Subhag, does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less. The thing is that job offers that pay an actual full salary, I was saying, don't seem to be listed or available, or somehow there's blockers that get in the way of people with Asperger's. But anyway, more or less answered the question. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
Hey, Barbara, I'll put one up while other people are thinking. So I was, I got hit with a quote over the week, and I thought it was interesting, kind of hit my area of interest. And it was from Warren Buffett. I don't know if you saw it this week. He said, "The one easy way to become worth 50% more than you are now, at least, is to hone your communication skills, both written and verbal." And that's what Warren Buffett has to say. What do you think about that? About the communication skills?
I mean, they really are so important within the workplace, right? And even thinking in interview situations, right? A lot of the questions that come up, you know, the employers are evaluating and saying, you know, do I think this candidate can work well in the group of people, right, they're going to be interacting with in the company, right? And I would say of all the skill development areas, this is far and away the largest area for the majority of my clients, right? It are learning these skills related to communication. And I really believe that most people can learn to improve skills in this area. And one resource actually that I like a lot and recommend to a lot of my clients are the materials from Social Thinking, Michelle Garcia Winner. And she just has, I think, a great way for people who learn these communication skills in more of an intellectual way versus intuitive. I just find that her strategies are very helpful to people. And am I saying this? I'm not an affiliate. I have no financial connection to that company. I just think her stuff is really good. So I would encourage anyone, maybe to, if you're not familiar, to take a look at the Social Thinking website.
Okay, we've got some questions in the chat, so I think I can ask away here. One is, can you talk a little bit about whether to disclose a diagnosis and when is the best time to disclose? Very good question.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think there's one right answer here. I think a lot is going to depend, on a particular individual and the situation. I will say generally, let's say you're on an interview. If a person is saying, you know, I believe that I can respond to the questions and you know, communicate my abilities, my feeling is, you know, you don't want to be bringing up possible problems really early on in the job cycle. All right. So if a person is saying, I don't really feel that I need any help or filling out an application, all right, I don't really see the value. Other people say, well, how about when when I get the job offer, right? Would that be the time when maybe I should tell my employer? And again, I think there, if a person is saying, I know that I'm going to need a significant accommodation on day one of the job, I think it is a good idea to let the employer know, but do it after you have your signed employment agreement, right? Because they can't then rescind that and say, oh, we didn't know, now we're going to take the offer back. All right. But that way too, you're just letting them know beforehand so they can be prepared. All right. So then when you're there on the first day, they're not kind of blindsided, right? Saying, why did this person let me know that they really need this modification? In my practice, most of the time when people are disclosing, they're already on the job. And it could be anywhere from a few weeks to, I've had people who have been on a job several years. All right. And now something happened, right? And they're realizing, I really do need this modification. Right. I've gotten feedback, right, from an employer. Maybe I'm on a formal notice to improve. All right. And then we can really look at the situation and say, okay, what would enable this person to meet the employment or the performance standard that's set for any employee in that job? Right? And there's no time frame, right? Yeah, you can disclose at any point. All right. And if something happens or you believe that you need a modification.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. There's another question. How do you deal with a young adult who has anxiety about privacy on the internet and in person?
Okay, so kind of a general, I guess I'm not 100% sure. So is this person saying just like kind of general anxiety in any type of...
They get kind of freaked out about worrying about disclosing things on the internet or worrying about the privacy in general. You know, a lot of our members have certain things that create anxiety for them, and this seems to be one of the areas, I guess, with this person.
Okay, so I guess since we're talking about employment, you know, I guess with things in the internet, I think anyway, kind of a good rule of thumb for anyone is, you know, anything that you're sharing, you know, just ask yourself, boy, if anyone could see this, right? Is there anything here that maybe I wouldn't want others, right? Private information, all right, that others could see and that could be shared. Now, if the person is asking more about anxiety maybe related to disclosing, another aspect or thing that I think would be important to realize is that if you disclose to an employer, you as the employee can tell them who has access to the information. It doesn't mean that anyone in the company, all right, could know. So a person might say, I only want my manager and the HR person, all right, to be aware of this disclosure, and I'm requesting accommodations.
That's really a good point.
Right, so they absolutely do not have it. It's not giving them permission to say, oh, we're just going to let the company know or anybody. Absolutely is the employee's choice. And then I would say if it's more general kind of anxiety, maybe about working or about interviewing, then one thing that is helpful is information, right? So if you're new to the interview process, I'll suggest and I'll find resources for my clients to say, first, how about doing a little bit of reading about the basics? What are employers looking for? Why are they asking certain questions? Right? How are they evaluating candidates? And then maybe we start saying, all right, now that we know some general information, how are we going to apply that to the particular individual situation? Right? So maybe if it's an interview, We start going through some of the common questions. Right, so let's come up with 2 to 3 main points, how to respond if you're asked. Then we start doing the practice. You're kind of slowly building up. All right, but sometimes people feel very nervous about it because they just don't really know what to expect. And if we could start to kind of close that knowledge gap, it really can help a person to feel more confident. And then certainly if they get more experience in practice, people say, yeah, that kind of builds my confidence, and now I don't feel quite as nervous.
Well, okay, we've got a lot more questions, so thank you for that one. The next one is, how do you narrow it down to a specific job when someone has an interest in a particular industry? If someone likes animation, how does one find the right fit in the industry or even related ones?
So again, with things like that, I think like the Occupational Outlook Handbook, I think would be a good first step to learn the basics, right? Kind of basic requirements, right? And one thing I like about the handbook, they also have a section of related careers, right? Sometimes that's where someone might say, you know, as I start to research one of my areas, maybe I'm finding out some things from saying, I don't know if this is really such a great match for me. But I might find something related, as we saw in the Brandon example, right, that is much more playing to my abilities. But then let's say a person does preliminary research and they see, yeah, I think this really looks good. Then we want to go to the next level. I find that basically any occupation, there's at least one professional association. All right, and oftentimes, you know, these are groups of people who are either doing the same job, right? Groups of an association of programmers, or people who work in the same industry, right? An association of marketing professionals. And oftentimes on the websites, they have a lot of free information, all right, that anyone can access. And this can be helpful because now you're looking at, for the professionals in that field, right? Maybe they're archiving blog posts or articles from publications. So you start to get a better idea of what are some of the issues that are coming up, right, or that people are discussing. All right, sometimes they have, they may record some, you know, sessions from conferences, right? So that can just be a way to get to that next level, right? And then if someone is saying, you know, I really feel very positive about this, I think another good step after you do the, you know, your own research, see, can I set up informational interviews? That's from speaking to people who are in that field, doing that work, not pitching them for a job, but really being able to ask questions of an expert. So someone might say, gee, as I did my research in this area, here I read that, you know, you need this very particular degree. Have you found that to be true? Could there be other ways to qualify, right? Or asking someone based on my background, right? Does it look like I'm qualified to do this work, or would I need some kind of additional experience or training, or et cetera? All these questions, right, that we can only go so far when we're reading about it. So I find those can really be helpful as well. Talk to some people who are doing that work. And even another way is, if that seems kind of you know, anxiety provoking or in the beginning, even looking at maybe LinkedIn groups, right? And I know there's some of those where people can ask questions and might say, well, I'm thinking about, right, this area. Can anyone give me some advice? And that could be another way, right, to reach out to professionals.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, this next question is a good question. How often do our kids on the spectrum get jobs through diversity hiring programs of corporation? Is this worth looking into? I've seen big tech companies boasting about these diversity programs.
So definitely people get hired through these programs, all right? And I've had some clients who have gone through them and some who unfortunately did not. So it's certainly not a guarantee. And I think they truly are, very worthwhile, and it really, can change people's lives. All right. And I think we're talking about these initiatives, like the autism at work, or where companies are saying, right, we're specifically, right, going to ask people who are neurodivergent, such as being on the spectrum, and we're encouraging them to apply. Maybe we have the typical 2-week kind of evaluation, interview, training sessions. All right. So definitely, yes, they hire people. Now, are they hiring tens and tens of thousands of people? No. All right. And an article actually I saw from a couple of years ago, we're talking maybe a couple of hundred, right, in these initiatives as companies are setting them up, and I'm sure the numbers are slowly increasing. And I just think that sometimes people may get, may not realize that, and sometimes say, well, if I, apply or I come in as a diversity candidate, it's going to automatically mean that I'll be offered a job, or I'm going to get lots of interviews in the company. And that's not correct. So I think, again, they have their place. All right, but then I think too, there can be other types of initiatives as well. Some people do better maybe when I'm in an internship, right? And I have some companies I know of who have created internships, right, for people on the spectrum. And it's not a whole company-wide initiative, but they give people practical experience in this area. Do we see that now if we have suitable openings? So I think it's kind of one thing. Definitely, though, I would say they're worth looking into without question.
Okay. So this is another question kind of related to hiring. When you note that an employer is not requiring the same standard of education experience for others than they are for persons with Asperger's, any thoughts how to manage that frustration?
So again, that's it's a very broad question. And I'm not quite sure what they mean by the standard of a job. I guess where my mind is going, I'm wondering, is this person, are they saying that they believe that
It sounds
a
like
company's discriminating? Or?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they think, I mean, to me, I think one of the frustrations with looking for a job, taking this person's issue, is I've been a hiring manager, and as you have, Barbara, and there are a lot of factors that go into the decision about who to hire. And some of them that work against people on the spectrum that may not be obvious is a lot of times it's who you know. So maybe this person knew somebody that worked there, and so they've been able to vouch for them. So there's this some kind of reassurance for somebody hiring somebody to know that this person is vetted in some way.
Right.
And the second thing is how comfortable everybody feels with them. And this is the question of the communication issues and some of the things we talked about earlier, that when it's sometimes a disadvantage for somebody on the spectrum who hasn't worked on their communication skills is that they may not have the charisma factor of connecting with people that they work with, and they may have more skills, they may have more education, they may have a lot of other things going for them, so that the employment process isn't one that's necessarily fair. The employment process has a lot of subjective factors that may appear that accommodations are being made in terms of education or things like that someone doesn't have. So I think it's important. I guess it's important to realize that if you don't get a job, there's a lot of issues besides just who you are, and you need to start thinking about building those connections and relationships so that you do have people. That's why we encourage our people to do networking and use people in their social environment to help you find a job, because you might want to talk about this, the percentage of people who find jobs through networking versus answering applications on the web or things like that. So I'll kind of end there and see where you want to go with that topic.
Well, and Judy, what you just said though is correct, right? There are a lot of factors, right, that happen in how employers are evaluating candidates, and some are subjective. But I will say too, and I appreciate the frustration, but that can happen with anyone and any candidate, right? And I certainly remember, for example, in corporate jobs that I had, and and usually you're going through the interview process, and candidates are meeting several people in the company in different departments, and then we would all get together for the meeting to say, we had our top 4 candidates, we've got one job to fill, right? And then kind of asking people, right, for opinions, and a lot of it was subjective, and sometimes it would come down to, right, a matter of saying, we have 4 people we know could do the job. Who does everybody think others would work with best? Right, and none of us can control that. So I just want to, say it's subjectivity comes in, I think, for everyone. Now, sometimes though, if someone is aware and saying, yeah, maybe I'm not, my communication skills, right? I'm not a real savvy communicator. Well, then I would say, okay, can we kind of look at though, maybe even how to say that on an interview and really focus on the abilities I have to get the tasks done. Right, so I've worked with some of my clients, for example, on language, and they may say, whether they disclose are on the spectrum or not, right, but some say, you know what, I'm not I wouldn't say that I'm, going to be your, most socially savvy or whatever language we came up with, but maybe they say, but you know what, I don't know, again, just talking then focusing on specific job skills or maybe results I got, right, on my job, or, young people sometimes, we look at maybe some projects they did when they were in college, right, and saying, well, here's how this was my contribution, the project was graded an A, right, these are my ability, here's where I'm really strong. So try and just kind of bring it then to where do I see the match and how I'm going to contribute to getting the job done. But as I said earlier too, I think all of us can say, but then if I'm noticing that, boy, maybe there is some work that I can do on communication, right, to be setting myself up maybe if I want promotions, right, or a different kind of job where those are going to be even more important. I really believe that most people can improve in that area.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Does anyone else have questions? I'm wondering, so I do see a couple career club people, and that are we have one, I don't know if he wants to expose himself, but I'll describe his situation. And if he wants to interact, that would be great. So this is an individual who has a PhD from UCLA and expertise in microbiology, and has been working for quite a long time in a research facility, and has published, has done a lot of great work in that area. But unfortunately, they eliminated, he's also competed for grants and helped generate over $1 million worth of grants. So he doesn't have a diagnosis, but believes that he is on the spectrum. And so they basically eliminated his position at the beginning of the year. And so he's now looking for employment. He's interested in going into some web data work area.
Okay.
But he almost hides the fact that he feels uncomfortable highlighting all his PhD experience, et cetera, because a lot of the jobs he's seeking are more entry-level positions, and he thinks that that will work against him. So he's part of Career Club, and for me and my co-instructor, we really would love to see him leveraging that knowledge and that strength that he brings to the table and turning it in a direction towards where he's interested in going in the web design, because we feel like he would be so valuable in those roles and it would be so appreciated. So if it was in, for a pharma company or biotech company, something where that plays a role. So if he were going to your class, Barbara, and if he feels like interacting on this, it'd be fine, but he's a kind of shy. He's just a wonderful person. I wanted to know what would be your thoughts in directing him towards a career.
Well, yeah, certainly, Judy, one thing you said was absolutely going through my mind, right? I could certainly see we want to look for matches here that potentially if this person said, doing more of the web design, but in some kind of a pharma or a scientific related area, certainly then, you could be making that case to say, and I really know, right, the customers, I know this industry, and that could give me a lot of, really help me to, make a really effective website, right, for this niche area. So that certainly could be one part of the approach. And I think I have worked, by the way, with a number of people at a PhD level, and I know that in general, people tell me I've had the experience or I am concerned, is it gonna seem like I'm just overqualified for the job? And sometimes on a resume, right, there are ways that maybe we're gonna de-emphasize, right? Maybe some of the areas that aren't a direct match, right? And I would be kind of curious if this person, another thing that's going through my mind is, what is their experience doing web design? All right, but maybe there are ways to look, again, are there some projects? How did I learn this? Make that more of the focus on my resume. And then certainly, in a cover letter and when you're on the interview, all right, sometimes just to say, this is a career change for me. And I realize, right, that it may be that, in the beginning, which is pretty typical when people change careers, I may be making less money than I did at the old, as I have to now build up experience, right, in the new area, or I may not be coming in with a certain title, right? But that's what's necessary to really learn and sharpen the skills to then be able to move up. All right, so even going out and to say that, and I also think this could be where networking can be so helpful, right? If we're looking for any connections, right, in companies where they could, make some introductions and let people know up front, here's someone who is doing a career change. They want to stay in this space, right? But they understand they don't believe they're overqualified. Actually, they have a lot of very specific skills that would make them really great doing the web design work.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks. We're going down a few little narrow paths here. There was someone who has, maybe it's a family member who's a recent graduate in poli-sci econ and is interested in a career in public policy or a think tank work in DC. And so some suggestions for how they might approach this career choice.
Yeah, I think, and I've had, by the way, a few clients in that area, and I have found, based on that experience, I do think networking is really pretty critical for those type of jobs. It is a competitive field. So thinking about any kind of context, how can I avoid, right, being one in that pile of resumes that are going to come through for these jobs? And then I would also, I don't know if this person has had internships or even sometimes volunteering, right, for organizations in that area of interest. And that sometimes is the way in. So I start to develop some kind of practical experience and also make some connections with people who then are working for these companies or know people or organizations that do. But I definitely think this is an area where you want to look at how can I start making some connections, as I
Yeah.
just mentioned, through some kind of volunteering, right, networking, and sometimes parents, don't realize how helpful they can be of just saying, well, who do I know who may know someone, right, at these companies? And I think probably because parents, maybe at the time, those of us of a certain age were looking for employment, there wasn't that as large an emphasis on networking as there is now.
Yeah. So one person is asking some questions, but I thought I might do a little profile on him.
Okay.
And have you advise him. So this is someone who did Career Club. He was in our first cohort, and he's a computer scientist. He has had jobs, and but worked for his family's organization, done some different things, and he was able to secure an internship with a company on the East Coast that develops tech. It's a startup, and they develop technology to help administer medication for people with disabilities. They decided they wanted to hire some people with disabilities to, so that they could understand the clients they work with, and also, get some good help. They're a startup, so they tend to be cheap. Okay. So this particular person is still on that internship. It's been a year that they've been on the internship. In California, we have something called the paid internship program for regional center clients. And so it's paid through that. So the company itself isn't paying any of their salary, but they're doing more and more contributions. So I think that this person is maybe frustrated about what should their career path be. They've been doing this for a year. What should they do next? Should they, do they need to ask for a raise? Do they need to, move beyond the internship and start looking for employment? How should they navigate this next phase of their career? And when do they know it's time to maybe leave an internship and move on to another role? And if the person out there feels like that knows I'm talking about them wants to add anything, happy to have them do that. But I thought it would be useful to have Barbara maybe address your questions. So go ahead, Barbara. What do you think for that individual?
Certainly, I think generally speaking, a year on an internship is, kind of a long time, right? And so typically, I think this would be, kind of a point where people say, yeah, the internship's really the, purpose there is I'm just starting out. I need to get some real practical experience, build up some skills. And I'm going to imagine here that after a year, the person did that. Startups are always a little tough because indeed, though, it's that pressure to get the project done, but we don't have the sales for a large staff. All right, now I don't know there, but what I would wonder, has this person just kept an eye, is this company advertising any positions? Or maybe even going to the supervisor, right? And saying, boy, I like this company, I really enjoy the work I'm doing. Just wondering, what opportunities might there be where I could get a full-time staff position, right? And see if I can get some idea, will there be opportunities coming up in the near future? Maybe this person wants to just start taking a look at some job boards to see what other opportunities are there in that space for that kind of work. All right, and just to get an idea, do I find a lot of openings? Do they look like they're a match? right? And there's nothing wrong either with a person saying, I see some other things, maybe it would work. I'm going to start sending out some resumes, and maybe I want to try a couple of interviews. All right, because interviews are a two-way street. The company is evaluating the candidate, but you as the candidate also are learning more about the job, what are the requirements, right? Learning more about the company. And it's certainly okay. The person might want to treat that in the beginning as a little bit of an information gathering. So let me just see what's out there, right? What do I learn on the interviews? It doesn't mean that I have to leave the current company if I'm really saying for whatever reason, I'm not finding things that look like they're going to be the right fit for me, but maybe finding out a little bit more about the market. What are the employers looking for, and seeing if I, put together a resume and send it out. What happens during interviews? Maybe I'm going to be really excited saying, gosh, I found a much better position. Or I might decide, okay, maybe I have to, I'm going to be at the internship a bit longer. But then even seeing, let's suppose another scenario could be, a person says, well, I've been on the internship, I'm doing fine. I look for some other jobs, and I'm realizing, though, I don't really have a lot of this particular kind of experience the companies are looking for, right, in these entry-level jobs. Maybe I can look at, is there a way that I can take on a little more responsibility in the current company as an intern, right? And just say, I would just like to really continue building my skills, right? Is there something in XYZ area where I can contribute?
That's a
So
good
then you
idea.
create a learning opportunity where you are right now.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important
Also,
aspect. Oh, Sabak, do you want to talk?
yeah, sorry, just a little bit clarity.
Go ahead.
Yesterday, my brother had a plumber come in, and he started and charged $2,000 for the service. And then I realized I don't know what the value of money is anymore. I don't know if it's worth the same or what money to ask for anymore. I feel like I'm clueless there.
So yeah, Sabag was asking in the chat, how do you know what you're worth? How do you know what a position should pay when you're in a position to negotiate your salary or find make a career change to make more money?
So certainly several ways to do it. There certainly is the website Glassdoor. I don't know if people are familiar, and this is where individuals who had worked at a company or are working post all kinds of information, right? Sometimes they'll say, or people might say, oh, I had an interview for a certain type of job at this company. Here are the questions they asked me. Then there are other areas where people post and they say, well, I work for this company, and for this kind of job, here's the range of salaries, all right, that are paid at this company or in this area. All right, so that can be one thing. I know there's some other websites that'll give some general salary data. Also, you can sometimes get a general idea too. If you go on the Occupational Outlook Handbook, they have a section for state and area data, and one of which includes some mean salaries as a guideline. So that could be another way. Here again is the value of networking. All right, so maybe with anyone you do know who could give some guidance because they work in an industry, or sometimes again in LinkedIn. Right, if there are certain groups and people have private conversations or privately reach out to people, right, to say, and not asking your salary, what you make, but saying, gee, I'm here's a little bit about my background. I'm 5 years in this industry. Here's the kind of job. What would you think a range would be? Or what is a range of what I should expect, all right, in terms of a salary? And something I'll just comment here, it's important to just be aware of geography. because sometimes depending on where you live can really be a big factor on what companies need to pay for talent. All right, so probably, for example, if we're talking about the San Francisco area, and I happen to know base salaries for basically any job are significantly higher, right, than they're going to be in other areas of the country because the cost of living is so high, and companies have to factor all that in.
What
Thank-
about freelance work?
And what
Like if I want-
specifically do you want to, is your question about it?
It's like
He's like
if I
a
want
software-
to, if I want to help other people, how do I know what money to ask for them if I do freelance work?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I don't think I quite heard
No,
the whole.
I'll ask it for him again.
Sorry.
So he's interested in doing freelance work and he doesn't know what to charge people for that kind of work. It would be in the software development area, right, Savag?
Software development and consulting.
So there again, I think for that kind of more specialized area, you know, I might be looking at, you know, are any people you have connections with, all right, who might know who you can speak to understand a going rate. Sometimes too, another resource on this whole thing of thinking about salaries is, again, a professional association, right? And maybe one that has local chapters, or there are people there, right? And that's part of why people join, right? They have educational component, but another is so I can just talk to other people in my industry or doing this kind of work, right? To find the answer to those questions. So that might be another channel.
Mm-hmm. I think, Savag, the thing you need to think about is who are you selling to? Because if someone goes to Orange County Asperger support groups and wants $50 an hour, that's a lot to the Orange County Asperger support group. But if they were going to Broadcom, that's not a lot of money. So one, it depends on who you're trying to sell to. The second is, have you done this before? Do you have a skill set? Do people, you know, when they bring you on, are you actually coming there with, you know, the plumber comes in and they know that they can fix the toilet, they can do all these different things. They're bringing in knowledge that they can just get it done. But if this is an area that's new to you, you don't bring that knowledge. If this is an area that you've been doing it a while, you have a portfolio of examples of you solving this kind of problem, then that's going to be worth something to someone. So, and then how long is it going to take? You know, and are they going to be looking at other people and other organizations? They may be getting 3 different bids, and then it's a question of pricing and whether you have a reputation. So all those are factors that go into choosing and you know what competitors might charge. So all those are factors that you need to consider when you consider a rate. Usually somebody who's newly getting into, say, consulting or doing this kind of work, usually you start off with a lower number and then you build it up over time as you gain that experience and reputation. I don't know if you
And,
agree.
you know, and part of it too is, you know, and again, we say freelancing, you know, another is, you know, would that include for you possibly contract work, right? Where companies say we have a limited project, we're going to bring someone in on a contract. And even there, even if you were just looking at it, and they're the company, typically they'll tell you, right? They'll say, here's our need. This is going to be, let's say, a 3-month contract, right? For X hours a week, we're paying this rate. And that could just be another way where you start to get an idea, right, of what are people paying, right, for this work. But definitely too, I think when you're on your own, certainly, you know, the customers are going to expect, you know, an expertise, right? And that's why they'll pay more too. And they'll say, you know, I need this person's expertise, but I need it on a limited basis, by the nature of the work. I'm a smaller company, you know, I don't have enough to bring someone on and be paying them a salary and benefits and all of that. But typically someone who is saying, sometimes I have, you know, people who come to me and they say, oh, I just graduated, or I have a year of experience and now I want to be a freelancer. And I would just have a question, do you really have enough experience at that point? Right, to be able, well, now I don't have a supervisor to ask if I have a question, right? And people are really expecting, I need this done, I'm hiring you. And I expect that it's, you know, you're going to meet whatever we agree the deadline is, and it's going to be to my satisfaction.
There's a lot of soft skills required in order to be a freelancer. You need to be able to communicate with the client. You need to be able to write up a proposal. You need to be able to keep track of your hours. You need to be able to bill. You need to be able to present status. There's a lot of skill sets to do it in a way that's professional. It's not just they give you something to code and you write it. There are ways of you getting that experience. I don't know much about it, but crowdsourcing is like a whole way of freelancing that's out there. There's Fiverr, there's like all these different things now that's kind of app-driven freelance work, which gives you opportunity, but it also reduces the value of freelance work. So anyway, those are all things to think about. I think we should see if there's some other questions in a different area though right now. Any other questions for Barbara? I'm looking to see if someone is there that I knew was thinking about something. I think that person is gone. We did have somebody, just so everybody knows, we did have somebody on the phone that I met with this week that works for a major corporation in the software development field, and they're looking at creating a autism at work or neurodiversity internship program. And so she attended today to hear what Barbara had to say.
Excellent,
so
excellent.
I hope that was helpful for her. But again, that kind of shows people that whole trend is growing and that there are opportunities there. So are there any other questions for Barbara? Barbara, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your availability today to share with other people. You're really making a difference for all of us, leading the charge in something that is really important to millions of people. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate that. And certainly hope that everyone here got some good information. It was really my pleasure to participate, and I appreciate all the thoughtful questions and comments.